Good morning, everyone. This is Greg Aden from Denver, Colorado, and it is getting chilly here in Denver, and I'm loving it. But not to be distracted. I want everyone to meet someone that I had a pleasure of spending some time with a couple weeks ago, virtually. Renee Breazeale, North Carolina, and we're going to learn a lot about you. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for making some time. Thank you for bringing your bravery and your beauty to my podcast. So, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, off air, you said you just addressed 200 plus women this morning as a keynoter or something like that. But tell us about that experience real quick, because you came on and you said I'm bright eyed and bushy tailed or very tired, but you look great to me.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I spoke about my foundation to DSS workers, where I want Department of Social Services.
Mm-hmm.
I want the people in our community to know that we're there as a private foundation for them to depend on as they're meeting people in the community. If they need help and they need help quicker than what the government can do, then
Sure.
we're there to bridge the gap. So it was enlightening. It's also Halloween, so they look quite festive, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Well, first of all, let's give your foundation a name, and then let's discuss the foundation and its purpose for us. Let our listeners know all about it.
It's the Victory Advantage. It is a private foundation that I am CEO and my husband and I co-founded. We actually just started the beginning of this year, so it is a new foundation. It's catching on. We're building some momentum. It's to help people with disabilities live independent lives. And that could be cognitive disabilities, it could be physical disabilities, but we all deserve to have what I'll call a normal life, whatever that is these days. But,
Right.
be able to live like you and I do,
Mm.
and independence, and to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah, beautiful, and a lot there. And again, thank you for doing something like this. It takes a huge heart, a lot of time, a lot of money. I understand. I've been involved in a few. But what was it? Where were you and your husband when you decided? And by the way, let's give your husband a name.
Ray.
Hello, Ray. If you're listening to this, you better be, because she's spending some time on it. When you and Ray were sitting there, laying there, driving there, wherever, what happened in that moment that he or she, you or he said, let's create a foundation?
Well, it's personal for us, but I owned a company for 32 years. Ray and I worked there together, but I started when I was very young. Let's say I was 12.
Okay. We'll go with that.
But it was a nut and bolt company, and I sold it in 2019 and was not ready to retire and wanted to do something. So Ray and I talked about it and felt like, with the experience that we had had in our lives, that the disability route was where we were supposed to go. I mean, for example, Ray's brother Davey had Down syndrome. He
Mm.
was raised in that atmosphere with the kindest, most loving individual I've ever met. In 2008, I had a brain tumor, and it left me unable to walk for a while. And I really got a feel for what people with disabilities go through. I felt like I was unseen and unheard and just totally ignored. So I went from my power suit and pumps to sitting down. So I went from being heard to totally absent in the
Yeah.
world. I made it my mission to teach people how to treat people with disabilities.
Mm.
And then, as this was going on, my bonus daughter, as I like to call her, had a massive stroke at the age of 29.
Wow.
So I've got some residual effects from the brain tumor after I learned to walk again, and so does she. And I just felt like, with all of these adversities that we had and have felt personally, that it was just something that we needed to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love what you said about you're teaching people to how to treat people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
my wife Tammy Fisher, shout out to her, mention her all the time in my coaching and on my podcast. But she has taught me more about how to be empathetic, how to see where other people are coming from, clearly the definition of empathy, but really how do we look at someone who is, well, less fortunate, less able, less uh, has less potential just based on their situation. But how do we look at them and not just feel sorry, but how do we go the extra step to really help them get to where they don't even know they want to go? What do you say to all that, Renee?
I really do think it's a learning experience because when you're young, especially, you just, I mean, I was told not to stare.
Mm,
That was the way that it was managed, and I learned that what meant the most to me was the eye contact, the telling me hello. I mean, they would ask Ray questions, and he would look at me and look at them and say, "She can answer your question."
mm,
So it's about how you treat them. Don't look at them like you feel sorry for them. Look at them like they're the individual, the child of God that they are, and that they may not have the same gifts that you and I have, but they still have a lot to give. So it's a matter of also of having patience,
yeah.
because I'm an advocate to for employers to hire people with disabilities. And one of the things I tell them is it may take them longer to learn, but they'll be the last one that heads out the door at the end of the day because they're so appreciative of the opportunities that they're being given.
Appreciative of the opportunities they are given versus some of our future leaders demanding privileges that they haven't even earned yet. I mean, think about the parallel or the opposite polar opposites of I deserve this versus I don't even know what I want. And you and Ray and others who have foundations like yours are saying, you deserve a chance. Let us help you. We have a restaurant downtown here, Inglewood, and they make it their purpose to hire people with learning disabilities and other challenges. Let's just say that, and they're the kindest people. They're serving beer and serving pizza, and there's live music there all the time. And if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. So
That's right.
let's just look at people as people. Now, if someone's being mean, they're being mean. Yeah, treat them accordingly. But I just love your heart and appreciate you wanting to share that with us. And you in your LinkedIn profile, it mentions you were in a male dominated industry for 30 plus years. And I just have to say this when I read it, and then it says nuts and bolts, male dominated. I thought, well, yeah, it kind of says where you were, but there's more to any business than just nuts and bolts. And I spent a lot of time serving an organization called Women in Travel Thrive. It's really all about women in the hospitality industry. Then, right or wrong or indifferent, during COVID, their jobs seem to be eliminated more than the ones that have nuts and bolts, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And so they put this organization together, and it wasn't about feel sorry for me. It was about let's help each other take back what's ours and/or find other positions that were either more qualified or equally qualified, and give us a chance for those seats. But what was it like when you left there, knowing you were part of something very successful? And I understand that you sold it for a song and came out okay on the other end. But what was it like leaving that position?
Well, I would like to tell you that I kind of bounced out of work that day, but I left work and I actually worked for them for a year.
Mm,
And as you can imagine, excuse me, realize it was going to be pretty difficult to work in the large corporate arena after having a small business for
sure.
so long and being in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was pretty different. But I went through a state of depression, literally.
Mm,
I ended up, it was right before COVID hit. So I quickly realized, thank God I did that because it would have had a whole different appeal. Because one of the reasons we sold was we were in a position where we needed to use the capital to grow. We would have found ourselves going into debt just to keep the doors open.
sure.
But at that point, I decided to write a book. And that was a real eye opener for me because I started out writing it about business. That was my thought process with the experience that I had. But I realized that my personal life was intertwined with my business life. As you mentioned, the nuts and bolts was more than just running the company. And I realized how many adversities that I'd been through, but like the brain tumor, how I was back in the office in my wheelchair.
Mm,
And, but it was '08. So it was more about the nuts and bolts. It was about survival. It was
yeah,
about, like you were talking about those ladies, it was about reinventing ourselves.
sure.
It was to be able to move quickly just to survive. But on the flip side of that, we ended up being stronger than we ever were before, and better at what we did. So we ended up being better on the financial statement with fewer people than we had before based on technology and equipment and that kind of thing. So
Sure.
it was amazing. And there was several times like that when we had to reinvent ourselves. And I I'm a person that's not adverse to change. So
Good.
I think that's a key for a small business.
Yeah.
It's what sets you apart from other organizations, especially the larger they are, the slower they move.
Yeah, that's a fact. What were your thoughts when you woke up one day, Renee, and whether you said it to Ray or one of your friends, I'm going to write a book. What was really going on in your head and your heart at that moment?
Well, I was standing on the back porch and looking at the water and heard about the world shutting down. And I was very grateful that we had sold it. But I had spoke at a women's event. And at the end of the talk, a lady came up to me and whispered in my ear, "You should write a book."
Mm,
And I heard Fabi Pressler, she owns Spark Publications. I heard her in my ear telling me I should write a book. And it was tough though. It really was. There were times when I was going through the adversities that would, take me a while to get through because it was reliving some really tough times.
sure.
And then there was times when I, soaring on top, and I named the book Soaring Through Adversity. So there was so many victories, which allowed me to see, as a business owner, we're always thriving to do better. We're trying to get that next goal and trying to hit that next mountain. And I
Sure.
realized that it almost seemed like, no, it did seem like that the mountains were even bigger after a big adversity. So it was nice to kind of relive the 32 years of experience that I had obtained. And I think it helped with the depression. It helped me get through those times by putting it down on paper. And I have told numerous people that I mentor, journal, write down your journey that you can go back and look on later. It's powerful.
Yeah. Let's give the publisher a name. What was her name?
Spark Publications. Her name was Fabi, Fabi Pressler.
Spark Publications. Okay. Well, you mentioned something about mountains and adversity, and as a guy that's climbed a few, the picture over here to is Mount Aconcagua, and that was my.
Ah,
You talk about adversity. I was up at 18,000 feet, realizing I left a newly adopted son and a pregnant wife at home, and what am I doing on climbing a mountain? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your judgment in your face. I've seen that face before. So I got my stuff together, came home, and pretended the relationship with my wife at the time was important. But the real reason I came home was because I realized I was not living my purpose. Being the franchise sales guy, blah blah blah, and making tons of money, winning awards was not why I would ever be remembered or what I would be remembered for. So I came down and later started Aden Leadership after I resigned for IHG. My point of this story is you can see yourself walking up a mountain and you think that's it. If I get to the top of this one, I've got adversity managed. But what it's really called, it's a false summit. You get to that one and then you go, oh my gosh, there's another tall one right behind it. Adversity never stops. There's always going to be a taller, tougher to climb mountain. And that's what makes men and women, them, people really strong, is because we don't believe we've ever summited the mountain. We always get to keep growing and going and climbing if we want to. Don't be comfortable. Don't be the person who says, I've got it all together, because guess what? You might say that, but we all have something that's going on underneath here. But I believe when we're uncomfortable, Renee, that's where the juice begins. When we're uncomfortable, we then believe, okay, what do we need to do to start being comfortable? And then when we get comfortable, we want to be uncomfortable again so we can really create really cool stuff.
So true.
And
So true.
as a coach, I remind my clients, those that are listening, when's the last time you laid on a couch and really did something cool? You don't. You just don't. Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
always thinking about something I need to be doing
yes, yes.
or I could accomplish. Absolutely.
Right. Tell me a little bit about Ray. How'd you meet this guy and why'd you decide to marry him?
I met him in a bar. You know, the typical way back 17 years ago, you would meet an individual. And
Yes, ma'am.
ironically, yes, ironically, I had been doing some estate planning that day and I was in Charlotte. And the lady that was helping me with the estate planning was standing behind me. And we
Hmm.
were in Matthews, North Carolina, which is about a 40-minute drive. And she had on a t-shirt and jeans. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't even recognize her. And Susan came up and she said, Renee, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I live here. And I said, oh my gosh, it's you. And she said, what are you doing? I said, checking out this guy at the end of the bar. And she said, oh, I know him.
Oh, gosh.
So she introduced us, and we started to date. And I had a rule that I've been married before, so my
Mhm.
rule was, you know, fast and hard. You're going to date for a year minimum to just to get to know each other, and that was just my preference. Not to say anything about, you know, other people's choices, but that was just my hard and fast rule. And we got to know each other for that time frame. And I had 2 kids; he had 4, so we pulled together the Brady Bunch,
Wow.
and they are anything but.
Sure.
It's a very unique, eclectic family, and but he's my best friend. He
Good.
really is, and I think that's the difference in the failed ones. And I just put an S on that word, didn't I?
Yeah. The failed. Yeah.
Yes. And well, seriously, there was should be an S there. But anyway, nonetheless, it's you know, I had learned from those adversities and put everything I had into this one. And it's been 17 years. I'm blessed.
Yeah. Congratulations. 17 years these days is a long one. My the mother of my children, I met her at a bar. And shout out to Red Lion in Vail, Colorado. Anyway, um, when you hear the word leadership, you as a leader, leaders in general, you and Ray leading a company, what would you tell? What would you tell a graduate from college or a graduate from high school these days? What does leadership really mean to you, Renee?
Leadership for me means building relationships.
Hmm.
The people you come in contact with is who is going to change your life. You want to find those people, not that you can just lead, but those that can mentor you, that you can learn from. And with you being in the business you're in, and I do it too, it's absolutely amazing, especially now in this age of technology where people want to send a text and email. Before I sold the company, that was literally driving me insane. I'm like, just pick up the phone, you know,
Amen.
just pick it up. So it's made a difference in my life, all the way from the first position that I had when I met my boss, ended up being one of the strongest mentors I ever had. And if it wasn't for his mindset of putting me in a position of one of the first industrial fastener sales girls, as they called it at the time,
Sure.
I wouldn't be what I am now with the foundation. But that taught me, and he taught me to build relationships, and that will help you be a better leader. And
Yeah.
one of the things I miss the most, I'm a salesperson by nature, and I thought that I would miss the sales, and I did miss the customers and those relationships. But what I missed the most was being a part of a team. I didn't think of them as employees, but as I mentored them and put them in a position to see what all they could achieve. And it was I missed it. I really did miss it, which I guess is why I do what I do now.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you saying the word relationships because in my humble opinion, I believe leadership is all about relationships. Those that you lead and those that you follow. And I've said on this show many times, I believe parenting and leadership are connected at the hip. They're almost, it's irrefutable to argue the point that how we lead our kids, we don't boss them, we lead them, we demonstrate. And argue with me if you want. One of the top traits of a great leader is leading by example. Because as you know, the kids aren't always listening to us. In fact, they choose not to listen, but they're always watching us. And,
Yes.
and then you look at, in my case, Brooks, my 13-year-old, like where did he learn to do that? And Tammy will say, Greg, you did that all the time when I first met you. So they pick up our habits, which is a good thing, unless we're showing them bad habits. Like
Yes.
treating a woman unkindly is a bad habit. Yelling at someone when you say you love them is a bad habit. But back to relationships, we get to, and I say that very intentionally, we get to lead. In my humble opinion, and yes, I'm a servant leader, and this is a servant leadership podcast, but I believe it's a privilege and an honor to lead another human being. It's not a chore. And any leader that has listened to this show, I've said this a dozen times at least, you're not a boss. You're not the guy. You're not that gal. You're not the most important person in the room. In fact, if you think about servant leadership, it's serve the people who are following you first and then lead them. And
Yes.
it's really fun because it comes from here instead of here. A lot of us we really are arrogant. We've got the VP title or the SVP. We're a chief of this or chief of that. And we forget, how did you get there? Back to your point, Renee, relationships.
That's so
So
true. And I think in building these relationships, I think some of the greatest moments was seeing people that never thought they would be a leader do just that. And when that's brought to their attention, they're like, wow, I guess I am a leader. And the change that you would see in them would be nothing short of miraculous.
yeah.
And yeah, it's not about the title, not at all.
Well, and again, argue with me if you wish, but if you and I were to walk a graveyard in Charlotte, North Carolina, I guarantee you we wouldn't see chief officer, senior vice president, regional director of sales. We just won't. Now we will see sergeant and colonel and lieutenant, and those are deserving titles, of course.
Mhm.
But it's interesting. We get so caught up in what's on my business card, and really all people care about is what's in your heart. And I know it sounds soft, but it really isn't. Asking somebody questions of how may I serve you today? How may I lead you differently and better today? If we really, again, do it over the phone, do it text or email, but my preference is do it in person so they can see that you really care and you really love them and you respect them. And I don't mean love in a weird way. I
Hmm.
love my team. Well, therefore you
Yes.
love your teammates. I mean, just say it. It's okay. I don't know. It's to me, it's just a fun space. I love leadership and I love talking about it because without leadership, well, let's look at our country. Without getting political, we haven't had the best leaders leading the one of the most powerful countries, on earth, and yet we kind of make it by. So anyway, what else would you like to talk about? What would you like to make sure that we cover today, Renee?
Well, I do have a story about titles, and it was talking about when I sold the company. People had, even though I thought of myself as a servant leader and thought that, I was a leader that led people, a leader of people, the public had totally associated me with my title.
Hmm.
And I realized that this is Renee Breazeale, CEO of Victory Bolton Specialty. And I didn't really think that much about it until people would almost say that. And then they would look at me and stop. And I'm like, I'm much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to go through a time where I had to tell myself that and find my identity. And now that's what my tagline says, and I believe it, and that's a servant leadership. So it was eye opening. So I would caution people to look past the title themselves, and when they're speaking to someone else, because the first question is, "What do you do?"
Yeah. But
Mhm.
what if we, and again, the what is always answered by a title first. I'm a regional vice president of a bank. Okay. Well,
So
how about if we
true.
ask, why do you do what you do? You may say exactly what you do and how you do it and the why, and not even mention your title. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Um,
If you've ever heard of this guy named Simon Sinek, a long time ago now, probably 17 years, well, maybe more like 11. Anyway, he came up with the golden circle, and he kind of reinvigorated the question why. Something we asked millions of times. Little kids ask this. Let me rephrase that. Asking why is something we did hundreds and hundreds of times when we were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. But then as we get older, we stop actually asking the most valuable question. Why are we here? Why the email? Why are we in this meeting? What is our purpose? And Simon put that together as something that Apple figured out. The why is more important than the what and the how. And when you start with a purpose, the relationship has meaning. If you start with a purpose and the why, a meeting has meaning. What is the purpose of this podcast? To get to know Renee and have her share her heart. That's it. That's my why. That's why I have really interesting guests on my show, because I believe they give a blank and they really have something unique to share. So what are your responses to that beautiful question? Why?
during my time with Victory Bolt, I had a team that I mentioned was fantastic. But when I trained them, especially in the sales arena or anything else, it was not what you sell or what you do. It's why you're selling it and why you want to help them and how you
Mhm.
want to help them.
Sure.
Which the why and the how for me was really important because it gave meaning to the nut and the bolt. Everybody's got nuts and bolts.
Right.
Think about it. Everybody uses them, and there's so many people that sell it. Well, you may not know that, but there's a lot of competitors out there that sell nuts and bolts. So, how do
Yeah.
you differentiate yourself? And that is having a why to get out of bed in the morning because you want to help people.
You know what differentiates where I go for what I need
What?
is how I'm greeted when I get there. Because if I'm not greeted, that means they really don't care. Now, again, we have to give everyone a. I wonder if they're having a bad day. Did someone just yell at them on the way to work or school or whatever? But how much? And again, let's be honest. I had 32 years in hospitality, so I might be a little biased. But that first impression will never ever be able to be redone. Now you can say, I'm sorry, I was a blank hole when you walked into my shop, and I
Mhm.
apologize and thank you for coming back. But it's just so easy to look someone in the eye and say, welcome.
Absolutely.
But again, parents, are we doing that at home? Are we recognizing our kids, or do we have our own damn phones in our hands looking down when they walk in? Because they do. Uh,
They do. I've got a quick story here that it's been funny until we've just had this conversation. But I mentioned I've always been a salesperson by nature. And back
mm-hmm.
in the day when my 35-year-old daughter now, one of the first times I saw her playing with the phone, she had a notepad and she had the phone up to her ear and she was talking and acted like she was taking an order. And I'm like, now thinking about it, that made me feel good at the time. But now it's like, how much did she see me do that when I should have been playing with her?
Yeah. If I had a dollar for every guest I've had on my show, then we can't should ourselves. It's just it is what it is. But
It is.
when we look back and think about the opportunities that we would change if we could, and we can. But you know what? Learning from them and showing up differently for people going forward, I get so frustrated when I see moms walking down the street and they're on their phone and the kids on the phone or dad's not paying attention. It's like you have no idea how quickly these days are going to go by, and then you can should yourself, and it's not going to make any difference in the world.
No, you cannot get that time back.
No, and I'm glad that my son's 13 and I'm as 62. I am having so much fun with him. I am have
Keeping
we've
you young. Is he
it
keeping you young?
absolutely, yeah, and we love to banter. We love to wrestle. We love to play football and basketball and throw the frisbee. And recently, we've been hitting golf balls a lot, and I love it. I wasn't able
That's
to play golf with my dad when I was 13, just because I wasn't good enough, and he never really invited me, and that's okay. We got to play later in life. Renee
good.
Renee Breazeale, I have thoroughly enjoyed spending time with you, and I appreciate your heart. I appreciate your openness from one salesperson to another, one leader to another. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for the foundation that you created. I will definitely make sure we put it in the text so people can follow you. Is there any last words of wisdom or anything from your heart you'd like to share with our listeners before we say goodbye?
Really constant how you do treat people with disabilities, and keep your heart and your mind open to what their abilities are, not what their disabilities are.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great reminder to look at what people's abilities are, not their disabilities. And no one wants to be judged with another set of eyes. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much for listening to us. You can connect with Renee on LinkedIn. We'll have her website underneath, as we always do in our script. Again, thank you, Renee, for being my guest. And if there's anything I can do for you, your loving spouse, Ray, and or your foundation, please reach out. I'd love to spend some time there.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
All right. Everyone have a great day. Don't forget to teach the people about how to treat people with disabilities. Take a moment and ask yourself, what could you do if you had a moment? And then do it. Don't just talk about it. Renee, thanks for being my guest. Everybody have a blessed day. Enjoy the cool weather wherever you are. And again, this is Greg Aden with Aden Leadership. I appreciate you being my ears out there today. God bless.